going to college these days is a risk. Your definition of culture, my definition of culture, outside of the Webster's definition, is going to differ just because we have different lived experiences. We have different takes on life and on the world. So, Nick, what is your take on culture? What's your definition?
Always that's been a tax break, right? To give money and to give donations has always been a massive tax break.
MedDevice Boston is your go-to medtech sourcing and education expo, September 30th through October 1st at Boston's BCEC. Engineered to advance a next generation of medical device innovation, this event unites 200 plus suppliers, 1,500 plus attending professionals, and OEM decision makers in the number 3 medtech hub in the US. Explore everything from 3D printing and AI to materials, regulatory tech, and contract manufacturing, all under one roof. Visit meddeviceboston.com to register and plan your visit. Links in the show notes.
Nik Agharkar, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Nick, great to have you on the show. I got the pleasure to meet you in person back in February in Cleveland. We sat down, we had a meal together. Good person. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy tax schedule to be here today.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, tax day was just Wednesday. For those that don't know, you can get 6 months extension from April, or if you're a small business owner, you already know. But it was quite busy. Certainly a lot of last minute forms came in, a lot of last minute questions. So, but we got it done. It's always interesting. But what I say is every day is tax day, because if you're touching money, if there's any kind of transaction, there's taxes involved, and people just don't think about it hard enough.
Yeah, well, and that statement on its own, it just generated a massive amount of anxiety for me, because taxes in general generate anxiety. So, to have tax day be every day would just be like the most anxious I would ever be, man. So I'm not going to live my life that every day is tax day, but I love that you love taxes so much that every day is tax day. How's that sound?
Well, I love it. Look, I look at the tax code as an incentive system. So it's what the government wants you to do, right? The government does not need your tax dollars. It's kind of a myth that the government's spending our tax money. The government is the bank. They make money, right? So ultimately, they're asking us to pay taxes so that we do things that are productive, right? That's why small business owners, investors, that's why they get the breaks.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's get into the first icebreaker here. Nick, my friend, if your life were a movie, what genre would the movie be? Who would play you? And what's the opening scene?
Wow, Jim, that's the first question. Holy cow.
Coming out hot.
If coming in hot. So if my life was a movie, it would probably be it would have to be a comedy, because I don't think that life is all that dramatic. I tend to laugh at most things where I can anyway. I think that if someone were to play me, I think I would want Jonah Hill, because I just think he's hilarious. Right? I think that he has that. Yeah, so he has that serious side, but still it gets that laugh. And I think the opening scene is that would be me in middle school getting bullied, and now look at me now, right? So I think it's been an interesting ride. Certainly not without its ups and downs and its bumps, but ultimately. It's been great, right? I'm just so grateful for every day and all the things that I have.
Awesome. I love that, man. And I asked that question because it gives the audience, it gives me a good look at who you are as a person without saying, who are you, Nick? Because the way people look at their life in genres, right, is different. And it's very telling about how they view life in general. How they view who they view would play them talks a lot about humility and themselves, their character, right? And the opening scene typically shows us where they view that dramatic moment that kicks off a movie, because we've all seen movies. I haven't had a guest on here who has never seen a movie, right? And the movies we as humans like starts out with that moment, right? It's that media res. Where is the starting point to the transformation and the narrative arc of that person's life? And so it gives us a great sense of who Nik is just in one simple question. So thanks for answering that, man. The next question is also me coming in hot, but I shift gears a little bit and we talk about culture, because this is a manufacturing culture podcast. I do have to ask at least one cultural question on here. So Nik, in your opinion, and let me backtrack a little bit. I've learned over the years that culture is highly individualistic. And so I like to ask my guests, what does culture mean to them? Because your definition of culture, my definition of culture, outside of the like Webster's definition, is going to differ just because we have different lived experiences. We have different takes on life and on the world. So Nik, what is your take on culture? What's your definition?
I honestly think it starts with leadership. And I think it starts with building leadership within every person in your organization. Especially if we're talking about sort of culture in an organization. I think that ultimately what we want from all of our people is ownership over your own sort of lane, your tasks, your job description, right? And I think that building that starts at the top. And what does leadership look like? It looks like a servant, right? How can I help you? How can I make you the best person and the best thing that you can be? And I think that's what we see in all of the best leaders, right? I think that there is that culture from the 80s where it was kind of leadership from behind, right? You must do this for me, and if you don't, then you're failing me. And it's kind of toxic, right? So I think that the better approach to building a culture and really just building a team is by example. And the leader has to lead by example. There cannot be any rules for thee, but not for me, right? If my wife is actually the head of human resources for a fintech company, and they're a fintech company, so primarily technology, but she's working on the return to office, and that's a sticking point for some people. But she makes it a point that it's 3 days a week, so she goes in 3 days a week because ultimately she's in charge of that role, right? So she has to show that it's not just for you. I got to come in too. Everyone's going to do this, and we're all going to work in the same direction. And it's the direction set by that leadership.
I love it. So let's shift gears again and get into the story of Nik a little bit. Nik, you're the son of immigrants. You understand, and this is, I guess, a little assumption on my part based on my experience of people who were children of immigrants, right? Typically what comes with that is the understanding of discipline and legacy and what it means to protect what you've built once you immigrate into another country. Nik, you grew up watching your parents protect what they earned. What did that teach you about risk and reward in general?
Yeah, look, I think that my dad is probably the biggest risk taker I know, and yet still the most conservative person I know. He moved across the world, right? He's from India, moved here in 1972. He always likes to tell the story with a suitcase and $8 to his name, right? That's all he had.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is that growing up, every year we would go back to India. And it's interesting because the first time I took a white person to India was right after college. And it was eye-opening for me because ultimately, when I was growing up, India was just India, right? It's what it looks like. It's how it smells. It's, the people everywhere, the poverty. It was normal for me, right? But ultimately, that really showed me just how much we have here. I think a lot of Americans just do not understand that there are places in the world where sometimes you just don't have electricity, or sometimes you're just not running water, right?
Yeah.
And that's shocking, I think, to most Americans. But for me, growing up, the air conditioning's out. Well, yeah, because there's no electricity, or we can't turn on any lights. There's no electricity right now. Or we can't make food because there's no water right now, right? I mean, these are things that we take for granted. And I think, again, that's why I am so grateful every day for just having another day and having all that we do have. And I think that that's really informed my risk taking. It's taking risks in a calculated way, right? Because ultimately, when my dad moved here, it was for a better life for that next generation. And I think that's what we all want. And, look, the work that you do with manufacturers and building up that middle class and really having those skills, because it's hard skills that we're missing in our economy. I think the work that you do is so very important in that regard, because we really need to make sure that folks understand going to college these days is a risk. If it doesn't work out, right? If you don't make that job, if you don't make that money, you're saddled with student loans for the rest of your life. Whereas a vo-tech school, being that electrician, that plumber, that carpenter, man, that can really pay off if you pair that with an entrepreneurial mindset. Some of the richest people I know own plumbing companies, right? HVAC companies. So these are the things that we want to think about when we're thinking about risk. And it really comes down to that person, right? And how you were raised. Because if you watch someone just take wild risks all the time, you might think that that's normal. Whereas you might want to think through, how much risk am I taking on versus that reward, and really going after those things that are high probability for success, right? When my dad moved here, it was for school, right? It was to get further education at some of the best universities in the world. So there's a risk there, but the likelihood that it pays off is very, very high. So it's ultimately balancing that kind of calculus.
And so I kind of want to touch on it and dig a little deeper into that thread, because we see Gen Z now going into trades at a clip faster than millennials, at a clip faster than Gen X. It equals that baby boomer entrance into the trades that we saw post World War II that did help grow the middle class, right? We had a very robust middle class, 1940 to 1980. We see these Gen Zers, and I think that social media has done a lot to help them understand the lie that Gen X was told, the lie that millennials were told about, hey, you go to college, you do XYZ, you're going to be able to retire at 65 if you do the right things, right? At the same time, we offshored, we closed vo-tech programs in high schools, we self-imposed a lot of issues into our economy and contracted the middle class by our own doing. And so now we're seeing this next generation say, okay, I don't want to follow that because that was a lie that these generations, I want to do something that fulfills me and gives me enough to get to that retirement age. The juxtaposition between that and your dad coming here for a better way of life, for that better access to universities, is that American privilege in itself, that we have that ability to make that determination as a generation? We're going to do vo-tech instead of university. I mean, walk me through your mindset and maybe the mindset your dad would view that through, as somebody who came here for those opportunities, right? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, look, if I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to say something a little controversial, Jim, and it touches on what you said, which is it was self-imposed, right? And it was self-imposed through the tax code. As I said earlier, it was an incentive system, right? So, if you look at it, right, in the 60s and 70s, taxes were crazy, right? We're talking about 70% top bracket, 40% corporate rates, right? These were incentives. Why? Why would you then go into business if you don't have a solid plan? If you don't have a real purpose to what you're doing? And how is it going to benefit then all of the people around you? So, you saw all of these big businesses fighting the tax code. But what we don't understand here, and what we really don't talk about, because I think we talk about taxes in just the wrong way, is this is shooting yourself in the foot, because ultimately what you're incentivizing is actually bad business. And the reason we've seen this now, right, is that you see all these mass layoffs, that hiring, all this cycle of craziness, which is what Gen Alpha is rebelling against after all.
Yeah.
It's because these businesses are just bad. They're bad businesses. They're not well run. They're poorly run, but it's cheap to do, right? If it's really easy to do, well, everyone can do it then, right? We don't have to actually focus on the quality of the work. We don't have to actually make that much money, because ultimately we don't have to pay that much in tax. You know, there's a great book. I'm forgetting the exact title of it now, but it's something like The Soft Currency Economy. And it's by this guy who is actually just a trader, but he tells this great story about how he needed his kids to do stuff, right? And so he gave them an option to do chores around the house, and he'll give them business cards, right? Because ultimately, what's the difference between a business card and money? It's images printed on paper, right?
Absolutely.
So he said, look, you know, if you do these chores, I'll give you business cards, right? And they didn't do anything. The house was a mess. The lawns weren't mowed, because ultimately he said, what am I going to do with your business cards? I don't need your business cards. So what did he do? He gave them all 100 business cards. And he said, every time you don't do a chore, you have to give me business cards. And if you get down to less than 30 business cards, there's no more rides to the mall. There's no more friends. There's no more sleepovers. There's no more pizza nights. And oh my goodness, what happened? House got cleaned.
Yeah.
Lawns got mowed, right? Because when you impose an incentive system that actually sort of penalizes you, that takes those dollars away, you find ways to do things, right? Do actually more production. So I think ultimately what we're seeing is actually the downstream effects of the Reagan era and the Nixon era economy, right? And that was big business coming in and saying, we can't pay these taxes anymore. And honestly, that's such a cop-out, because what do you mean you can't pay these taxes anymore? No, that's not the answer. The answer is you can't run a good business anymore. And so 100%. I think Gen Alpha actually has the right idea, which is, and I think social media has helped in this, which is to start your own, right? Start your own business. And ultimately, that is something the tax code really incentivizes. You know, a lot of my clients, they own small business, and I work with them on tax strategy. They tell me, well, how can this be legal? I feel like this can't be legal. It very much is. And the reason all of these strategies and these benefits for business owners are legal is because we want them to produce. We want businesses to be productive, to employ our people so that money can get through the system, and so that we have a society that we actually want to live in, right? We think about these golden ages, as you mentioned, right after World War II. Well, guess what? Tax rates were enormously high. Public work system, the government put people to work, right? These are opportunities that just Generation Alpha has no hope of getting. And so I think they're creating it on their own. And I think we should bring back folk tech schools. And I think we should go to a higher tax regime. I think that's a super controversial thing to say, and people brand me as socialist because of it. But ultimately, that's capitalism. It's actually very capitalistic to say, actually, we should raise taxes, especially on corporations, because maybe they'll think twice. Maybe they'll think twice about hiring all of these people that they don't need and then laying them off ultimately.
You may be thinking, why do I need to attend Med Device Boston? Because you're going to do more than browse. You'll build your pipeline. You'll see, you'll touch, and you'll engage with innovative solutions from 200 plus suppliers while participating in hands-on workshops, expert-led education sessions, and curated matchmaking, all engineered to accelerate your projects. Whether you're solving design, regulatory, or production challenges, Med Device gives you key conversations, timely insights, and the tools to move forward. Med Device Boston. Advance your pipeline, advance your network, advance what's next.
And I just read something in somewhat preparation. I told you before I hit the record button, I don't prepare for my guests because I don't make any money off of this, right? But I did read something. It came across one of my feeds. Maybe it was on whatever. Anyway, I read it, and it was the American general public and their view on ideal wealth distribution, right? And the ideal wealth distribution for the average American who was in this survey looks nearly identical to what it looked like in the 1950s and 1960s when we had that robust middle class, right? Where the wealthiest 1% wasn't making 1,000 times more than even the middle class is, right? Which we have now. Like the discrepancy in the wealth distribution right now is astronomical, right?
Mhm.
And I too am told, well, that's kind of socialistic. I disagree. I think it's very capitalistic to talk about, let's have a wealth distribution that incentivizes businesses to operate better, treat people like people, and have a thriving middle class that can then buy your fucking products down the
Right.
road, right? If
Right.
we have that inequity in wealth, who's going to buy your products here in the actual place that you're trying to make them?
I mean,
Sorry,
again,
rant
I
over.
know.
What do you think about that?
I think that you're not only is it dangerous to have this, but it's very, I'm sorry, not only is it inequitable, it's dangerous, right? Because ultimately with great power comes great responsibility. So when you have these multi-billionaires and these families that we don't, look, there are thousands of billionaires in our country, right? And we don't know all of them. There's thousands of them, right? So who are these families that are controlling so much of the political climate in this world, right? And look, this podcast is getting a little political, but ultimately, I think it's a bad thing to have a few billionaires funneling money into politicians that are ultimately making laws that hurt the middle class but help that top 1%, right? And I think you're right. I think if you asked any American, they want a broader distribution of wealth. And the reason for that is because we should not have this concentrated piece of power. I'm not saying we shouldn't have wealthy people, but how much is enough? How much is enough? Do you need to own an island? Really? I mean, it gets to the point of how I was raised, right? My dad came from nothing. That, where he's from, to call the building he lived in an apartment building is generous. So it was built with wood, right? I mean, it doesn't look anything like an American style building that you would think of.
Right.
So, look, I think that this is absolutely correct. And it really goes to the heart of all of these isms, right? Socialism, capitalism, communism, they can all be corrupted, right? They can all be 100%. Corrupted. And what we're seeing quite literally right now is the corruption of capitalism. I think capitalism can work. It can work really, really well if you have a tax system that incentivizes people to do all of the right things, right? Right now, we have a tax system that incentivizes billionaires to do weird things with their money that do not help people, right? Look, we saw, in your intro into this question, you said, in the 50s and 60s, we saw the same distribution. We also saw a boom of charitable organizations, right? Organizations that did good for society. Why? Because that has always been a tax break. Always that's been a tax break, right? To give money and to give donations has always been a massive tax break. So we saw the Guggenheim Foundation, right? Yeah. All of these wealthy families, Ford started all of these foundations then because, the taxes were really high. So what are we going to do? Well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go do good with my money. And that's still very much available to people in the tax code is these charitable deductions and charitable donations. And I tell people all the time, and you're not mad about paying taxes. You're mad about what you think the government is doing with your tax money. So why don't you just do it? I think
that's a great point.
Yeah, just do it yourself.
I think that's a massive point, man. Because we don't always know where, and in the 50s and 60s, we saw highways being made. We saw national parks being created. We saw the things that benefited all of us, right? Being used with those tax dollars. I think now there isn't that level of infrastructure being built in this country, right? And when I look at the contraction of the middle class and the relationship that has to offshoring, right? We offshored We decimated our capacity because we sent stuff overseas. We crushed our workforce pipeline because then we closed schools and told kids that factory careers weren't good enough. But we also let the infrastructure crumble because those tax dollars that we had historically seen coming in from those companies, those large corporations, that higher tax bracket, wasn't there anymore. And so now I can't drive to California without having to switch lanes like 12 times because of the ruts that are in the freeway between Phoenix and LA. It's disgusting, man. But we don't have the tax revenue to make that better. So, and that's just a side rant to your response.
Well, no, I think it's an important one because right now we're in this regime that wants manufacturing back in America. So do I, right? So do I. And I think that's certainly true for you as well. But we're not ready. We're nowhere near ready, right? I mean, again, to your point, okay, great. So you build a manufacturing facility. Are you going to build it in the middle of a city? No. Are you going to build it right next to the port? No. So you're going to be building this manufacturing facility far away from schools, from city centers, because they're loud, they're noisy, it's smelly, right?
Yep.
Ultimately, you then need to get those goods from that point to the port. That's a long way. To your point, we I-95 collapsed in Philadelphia. We have bridges in Pittsburgh that are spewing off rocks and asphalt onto the underpasses below.
Yep.
This is a serious problem. We have ruts in the desert, right?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? How are we going to get heavy equipment and heavy trucks from those manufacturing facilities to the port? So even if we could snap our fingers and build 50 plants in one day, right? It still wouldn't help us because you can't get the products to market. So again, when we talk about capitalism, we have to talk about taxes because it's useful. And I don't know when it became a 4-letter word to care about your neighbor. That's what it seems. It seems that we don't want to help each other. And that's the same narrative around healthcare, around all of these things that are branded socialism, when the reality is most people that are lower class and lower middle class have government subsidized healthcare, right?
Absolutely.
And it's Medicaid, Medicare. So ultimately, you're railing against things that we have in our country that if we didn't have, hospitals would close. We're seeing that now, right? How many rural hospitals are closing? Again, I'm not a socialist. I'm a capitalist, but this is capitalism in its purest form. It's understanding how taxes play a role in it and really how money is created.
So, man, this is so far from the direction that I thought we were going to go, but I'm so happy with this direction because this is like warm and near and dear to my heart, right? Having these conversations and I love when politics come up because politics are in everything, right? And people who say I don't bring politics into it. Politics are in everything. There is not an aspect of any human being's life in the US that politics doesn't touch. And so the more we talk about it, the more we're able to have healthy discord about political things that are happening, whether you believe in what is being done in this regime or you don't. Let's talk about it, right? Let's have a healthy conversation. Nik, as you look at your strength, your skill set, your world, what makes you came on the show and said every day is tax day, and it gave me like nausea and the heebie-jeebies. How can we leverage a tax code to bring us back from this late stage capitalism that we're facing right now? Because we really are, man. Like we're at a weird point in this country's life cycle that a lot of European countries have faced 50 to 100 to 200 years ago, and they made it through. How do we get through this using your world of expertise?
I mean, to be honest, the first thing I would do, this is outside of my world of expertise, but before we get to that, the first thing I would do is limit everyone's social media time. Everyone. we are absolutely rotting our brains with this mess, right? Because it's an echo chamber. And to your point, when you talked about politics is in everything and we should have open discourse, I have friends who won't even talk to me anymore, right? Because I criticize what the current regime is doing. But
Yep.
all of us should be doing that, no matter who is in
Absolutely.
power and who you
Yep.
vote for. As soon as that person gets into power, I don't care.
Yep.
I voted for Obama. I voted for Biden, but I was critical of both. Absolutely.
Both of them. Absolutely.
You should be.
Yes.
None of us ever should be, as Americans, should be pro-government. That is quite literally against our American founding. Right? We were founded as an independent nation to say, I throw off the yoke of monarchy, of someone ruling over me, because I am independent. We all have the ability, all of us, each man has the ability to pursue happiness and liberty. The liberty, freedom, right? That is our ethos. And so for anyone to be cheering on what an administration is doing is wrong. It's just wrong. It's
100%.
un-American. I don't care who is in power. Once that person gets into power, they work for you. And ultimately, you should be able to critically think and say, this is wrong. I don't like it. And I'm not going to continue to vote for this, right? But ultimately, I think we've lost this thread because we're all looking down on our phones all the time, just getting angrier and angrier at one another. And we can't even talk about it anymore. Right.
Yep.
And so I think that using the tax code in an important way, the first thing to do is fix the corporate rate. The corporate rate is going to go down to 15%. That's capital gains. What are we doing? These people are making billions and billions. Apple is a $1 trillion company, right?
Yes.
Why wouldn't we tax them? Why not? Right? Why not? And then use that money to fund programs for the middle class. Free Votech schools. We want manufacturing back. Let's tax big corporates and put that right into our roads. Let's build bridges. Let's build rails, right? The money is there. It's not like we don't have that ability to go get that money from these large corporates and fund important programs, right? And then on the other side of the ledger, it's giving more breaks to small business owners. We honestly, we don't do enough. Small business owners, and a lot of them pay some of the highest taxes because they simply don't understand all of the rules and regulations and advantages they have, because a lot of them started the business coming out of a job. And so they treat it similar to how they know, right? They know the job. So they understand what they need to do to get the work done. They pay their bills. And ultimately, okay, if my tax is the tax, I guess that's it, right? They don't understand the code as much as these huge corporations do. And so what we need to do is give them clear rules about what they can do with their money, and honestly, give them better breaks. I think that if you're a small business making less than $1 million, your tax rate should be 15%. Absolutely, right? Because you're probably employing most of the people in your community, and ultimately, you should be rewarded for that. And for these large corporates that are making trillions and billions of dollars, share with the rest of us. You're in this country. You are employing thousands of us. Why not give back and make the country great? We want it to be great again. Yeah, I think it is one of the greatest countries in the world, but our bridges are falling down. You look at China. Why are they the manufacturing king? You can get from halfway across China to a port in an hour, right? On a high-speed rail. We can't even get Amtrak to run on time, right? No. Our airports are a disaster. I hate flying domestic because nothing is correct, right? Nothing is done correctly because, again, we've railed against taxes and said, no, we need to pay the least amount of tax possible. Ultimately, that hurts all of us, right? And we should be demanding more of our politicians, especially on this point. Because, again, if we don't hold them to account and all we do is cheer them on, we don't get anything. We get screwed.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at every president that we've had, right, in one way or shape or form, they've been a shitbag, right? There has been no president that the U.S. has had that has been that like model gold star human being that we put on a pedestal, right? Like George Washington, founding father, but he owned slaves. He did things that was not
war. He left the war to put down a rebellion on one of his farms because they were going to unionize. Absolutely. He left the Revolutionary War to go tell his workers to stop doing that. I mean, come on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Keep
So
going. Sorry.
yeah, but so to me, that's the criticalness that we as U.S. citizens and the population of this country needs to look at. To your point, we have to be critical of our leaders here. We should be critical of our leaders. No leader is above that condemnation, I guess, is the best word to look at it, right?
And
We
honestly,
have to be holding them to a different standard.
What it comes down to is there's no red team and blue team. There are no teams here. Once the voting is over, we all should coalesce around the fact that these people need to do their jobs and their job is taking care of us. And
100%.
if they aren't going to do that, vote them out. I don't care who they are. Right? Ultimately, we have to be able to hold these people to account. Otherwise, nothing gets done.
Yeah. And I want to go back to your solution, because to me, that does fix all three of those self-imposed issues that I talked about we did to ourselves when we started offshoring, right? That higher tax code, yes, that fixes our infrastructure. That can pay for the VOTEC programs. That revamped tax code for small businesses. I mean, when I talk to high school students, I say, if you're willing to take out $100K over the course of 4 years to go to Southwestern Arizona University, Temple, whatever it is, right? Whatever directional school that you're going to pay an exorbitant amount of money and not recoup your ROI for 10, 15, 20, 30 years in some cases, go to VOTEC school, learn a trade, take out a loan for $40,000, buy a Haas machine, put it in your parents' fucking garage, and start making parts. Go on Xometry, go on any of these platforms where you can get work and pay off that machine using a tax code that is favorable to that system, and build something. That's how we build the capacity back for manufacturing. It's not tariffs. It's not this other stuff that we're being told, because corporations aren't going to build the capacity back. They're going to bring menial jobs back, not manufacturing. So let's encourage the people who are here that are willing to take that chance and risk and really say, okay, I'm going to convert my parents' garage into 240, and I'm going to put a Haas in there with a robot, and it's going to just load fucking parts all day. And in 3 years, I've got that machine paid off. It's a ton of risk, but that's how we build that capacity back up. Am I way off base in that thought process, Nick?
No, I mean, look, I think the risk is much greater with the loan, right, that you take out for college. Because ultimately, if you go to, whatever directional school and you study sociology and it was a lot of fun, what are you going to do? How are you going to pay back $100,000 plus interest? Because this is the thing, is people don't understand compound interest works both ways. It can work for you, it can work against you, right? Once you take out that loan and the interest starts compounding, it's working against you. There's a reason why people are spending their 40s paying off college debt still, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's the interest. The interest continues to compound and the rates can reset. And so now what happened when the rates got hiked? Oh boy, right? People can't think. Look, we're already seeing the highest record levels of college debt delinquency because you cannot keep up because wage growth hasn't kept up. And so I think, to your earlier point, right, it's balancing the risk and the reward. If you buy that machine, by the way, with bonus depreciation, you can depreciate all of it right in the first year. So you get that tax break, which is great. But ultimately, you're also, as we were talking about earlier, thinking critically about the business, about saying, okay, I'm going to make this work because I have to. It has to work, right? I don't have any other choice. I've got to make these widgets and sell them as soon as I can. Right. And I'm going to find creative ways to do it because I don't really have the money to do otherwise. This is how good businesses are started. Right. This is how Ford was started. He built one at a time. Right.
Yes.
One at a time until we could get that line up functioning. So, I think you're not wrong.
All right. So, Nick, we're coming up on our time because I was late to the recording and you've got a hard stop. So, what I want to do, Nick, is I want to have you on one of my other shows where we can talk more wealth strategy, where we can really dig into how taxes, how wealth strategy can impact the way that people lead their companies, the experience that employees can have in manufacturers when companies are doing the right things with the wealth and some of the tools and techniques. So I'd love to have you on my other show. Typically, my last question is, what haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience? But we didn't even get to your story really. So I mean, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share in like the next 30 seconds that we couldn't cover on another episode?
Well, I think we certainly should continue talking. I really enjoyed my time. Thank you so much for having me. I think in the last 30 seconds, I would say we've got to be better to each other, right? I think that we have really divided ourselves, and I'm serious. Limit your social media time. I've taken to really limiting myself, and my mental health has improved. The way that I think about people and the outlook that I have. Again, so much of our media these days is all about just creating emotions, and that's their job, right? You can't sell anything without emotions, and they're always trying to sell you something. So I think that the big takeaway I would want people to know about me is just, really, really think through how you approach your neighbor, right? Because I mean, some of my best friends are massive Trump supporters. I don't necessarily agree because, again, I don't support any government. But ultimately, I have to live with them, right? We have to learn to be better to our neighbor.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely your mic drop moment, or one of them. You had a couple in there, Nick, but I do want to say I really enjoyed our time together today. It's not every day that I get to go down this rabbit hole with people either that I agree with or that I disagree with, and so I appreciate you taking that time and getting me all fucking wound up on a Friday, and excited to talk to you soon. But thank you overall, Nick, for being a guest today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
You may be thinking, why do I need to attend MedDevice Boston? Because you're going to do more than browse. You'll build your pipeline. You'll see, you'll touch, and you'll engage with innovative solutions from 200 plus suppliers while participating in hands-on workshops, expert-led education sessions, and curated matchmaking, all engineered to accelerate your projects. Whether you're solving design, regulatory, or production challenges, MedDevice gives you key conversations, timely insights, and the tools to move forward. MedDevice Boston. Advance your pipeline, advance your network, advance what's next.